Welcome to Vegan Business Talk with Katrina Fox, author of Vegan Ventures, Start and Grow an Ethical Business. Hello and welcome to episode 121 of Vegan Business Talk. I'm Katrina Fox, journalist, author and PR consultant and founder of Vegan Business Media, a content events and training platform providing success strategies for vegan business owners and entrepreneurs. Now, just quickly before we jump into the main part of the show, I wanted to let you know about my online PR course and group coaching program, Vegans in the Limelight. Now, this is a 12-month online program where you have video training that teaches you everything you need to know about how to do your own PR. You can ask questions on the platform and you can also post your proposed pitches and media releases before sending them to journalists to get my feedback. You also get to jump on a monthly live group call where you can ask whatever questions you want about your business, and you can get tailored help from me on anything to do with raising the profile of your brand. So it might be that I look at your website and give you some feedback, or how to improve your LinkedIn profile and other marketing and PR topics. So if you'd like to find out more about that, just hop on over to veganbusinessmedia.com and you'll see a link there for Vegans in the Limelight. And now on to the main part of the show. In this episode, I interview Melissa Hobbs, co-founder of The Vegan Company in New South Wales, Australia. Launched in 2018, although the business was registered in 2017, the company is the go-to destination for vegan fashion and beauty in Australia. Its aim is to make vegan living stylish, desirable and accessible by connecting people with an ever-growing collection of sustainable, cruelty-free vegan fashion, beauty and feel-good news. The Content Hub shares inspiration, ideas and information, while the online store sells a curated range of vegan fashion, beauty and homewares. Melissa has enjoyed a successful career in magazine publishing, holding senior positions in advertising and strategy at leading mastheads including Vogue Australia, GQ, Elle, Delicious and News Limited. Melissa is also the founding partner of eFragrance, one of the first digital beauty retailers. Prior to launching the Vegan Company, Melissa co-founded Meat Free Week, an award-winning global campaign aimed at raising awareness of the impact excessive meat consumption and production has on animals, the environment, and human health. In this interview, Melissa discusses why she left the world of mainstream media publishing to start a vegan fashion website, how and why the original vision for a global content hub morphed into a more localized version, why she chose an affiliate sales model to monetize the site instead of drop shipping or other methods, how she decides what type of content and brands to feature on the site, how the site has been funded to date, the benefits the company has gained from content retargeting and native advertising, and much more. Here's the interview with Melissa Hobbs from The Vegan Company. Hello, Melissa. Welcome to the show.
Thank you, Katrina.
Lovely to have you on. And I understand you're based in the Northern Rivers, which is a lovely part of Australia. So fantastic.
Thank you. I know it is fantastic. I get to Sydney regularly, but it's a very special part of the world.
Oh, wonderful, wonderful. So now your business, it's called The Vegan Company. So tell me a bit. I always ask people, as you know, and I know you're a listener of the podcast, the first question is I always love to know why people do what they do. So what's your why? What are your drivers for running The Vegan Company?
Yeah, look, I'll break it down into two, if that's okay, because I've got a personal why, which is probably a little bit different to the business why, but they sort of feed into each other. So for me, from a personal point of view, and I sometimes get embarrassed saying this because it is a little bit cliche, but I want to be somebody that makes a difference. I absolutely come from a space of a love of animals, and I feel that the way we as a society treat them is just unacceptable. And I suppose, that's my thinking around that is that we've for a long time we've hoodwinked is probably not quite the right word, but we've, as a society, we've probably been led astray by a lot of clever marketing. So that's probably a personal why for me. It's about making a difference in the lives of animals. And and look, actually, this is possibly something I read on one of your newsletters, Katrina, that, when you think about a vegan business as a form of activism, if you can run a successful business in the vegan space, then that in itself is about creating positive change. So that's probably my personal why. From a professional point of view, I was a vegetarian for decades and found the transition to becoming vegan really hard. And I feel embarrassed saying that, but it's the truth. And I'm vegan now, but it's not my first attempt. And interestingly, obviously because I do live in the Northern Rivers, there's, lots of amazing vegan food up here. We've all seen a change, this explosion in terms of vegan products. But with fashion, I used to work in women's magazine publishing, and as did my business partners, and I found.
Okay, I didn't know that. That was interesting. Who is it that sent me your info? Will, he admitted that's an important thing.
But his wife Sally. So Sally, Laney, and I have all worked on Vogue Australia. We've worked on GQ and different magazines.
I think I read. Now I'm saying your name. I'm thinking it sounded familiar now that you've said that. Oh, interesting. Okay, how long ago did you do that?
Oh, gosh, I don't want to say because I sound so old. But, no, not that long ago. Look, honestly, actually not that long ago. So I left Sydney, probably 9 years ago. And up until that time, I'd had like a 20-year career in publishing. And we were on the advertising side. But by the time I left, I was head of strategy for the group accounts department in News Limited. So quite a senior role. And working across lots of different magazine mastheads and brands.
Got it.
So, but anyway, so going back to the why, we just it was sort of like, it was hard at that time. It's certainly easier now, but it was hard to find fashion that spoke to us, is what I'd say. Yeah. And it wasn't all in one place. It wasn't easy to find. And I think that's really where the idea came from. And originally we were talking about a product and then we were talking about a shop. And I think everybody at that time had probably the same idea around doing a shop because there's suddenly been this explosion of vegan retail spaces. And for us, it was just like, or for me, actually, I actually remember saying this. I went, that's just not going to get me out of bed in the mornings. That just doesn't excite me enough. And I think what excited me, and it's probably again from the publishing background, is that a content hub, so building like a content hub, which also happens to have a place where people can shop if they want to, from a tightly curated range. It just made sense that as a content hub, we can share information. So really the why for the business was to make vegan living stylish, desirable, accessible, and actually connect people with this sort of ever-growing collection of information that's sort of around sustainability, cruelty-free and vegan in that sort of beauty, fashion, life space.
Fantastic. Now, I love that. That's really interesting because, I think we're starting to see, as you can probably tell, a rise in vegan beauty and vegan fashion. We're starting to see some amazing new materials coming out. So it's quite an exciting time to be in this space. So that's amazing.
Definitely.
Just tell me quickly then, do you, when you say you create a content hub, is this an Australian, is this for predominantly Australian audience or is it more for a global audience?
No, look, definitely. Look, it's that funny. And you would probably, I know this from even listening to a lot of your podcasts, what you think you know when you start out is not what you really know. It's not what it ends up. So the vision originally was to have this global content hub. And, probably the thinking back then was around the time, it was a little bit later, but they weren't really on my radar at the time when Plant-Based News and Live Kindly launched. Yeah. And so I think that for us, and we are just huge fans of those guys. And in fact, we have a content sharing arrangement with Live Kindly, which Sal's set up, which is fantastic. So we can actually post some of their content on our site. But we just felt that I suppose as we've gone along and as we've really looked at where our audience is coming from, it is predominantly Australia. And I think there is a piece missing. So for example, with fashion, as you'd know, they're now entering, as we're entering autumn, winter, they're entering spring, summer. So so when we were doing the content, when we were thinking we were global, it was like, oh, this is tricky. Actually, how do we address this? And then even from a social point of view, or if we're pushing the content out, but our audience is largely sitting here, well, they're not actually interested in summer dresses because they're actually interested in scarves at the moment, or boots versus, So we really want to own that Southern Hemisphere space.
Great. Nice. No, I think that's great. And it's a very good point. I know from friends I've got who work in that vegan fashion retail space, they say it can be really tricky because, like you say, with the seasons, that, we're literally completely opposite. So that's great. Okay, that's awesome. So I love that you've identified a space that hasn't really been owned yet in Australia or in the Southern Hemisphere, as you say. So that's fantastic. So tell me a little bit then about, and I know you've got this background in publishing, but what were some of your key challenges when you were first starting out with the business?
Look, I think it's possibly the same for most people when you are choosing to do a startup and fund it yourself in the early stages until the revenue generation starts to kick in. So it's time and money, that's what it really comes down to. And usually when you start, you're juggling potentially other things as well. I've got children. Sally, who's my business partner, has, she's got 3 children, and, she lives in Sydney, but we're busy. And so it's always about, the challenge is really 2 things. How are we spending our time? And look, interestingly enough, I've got this massive clock that sits up on my office wall, and its only purpose, it's actually not even ticking at the moment, which is probably not a good sign, but its only purpose is to visually remind me each day that the biggest resource I've got at the moment is my time. So how am I spending it? Where am I putting my energy? Because when you run a business and your back's against the wall because you need it to make money, it's like, what am I doing? What decisions am I making? Am I solving a problem for people? So time and money, I would say, and how you choose to spend those.
Got it. So what was involved in, because this is a content hub, and some people in listening might think, oh, well, that's kind of easy enough to set up. You can kind of set up a blog or a template website and stuff. So can you maybe dispel some, because I know as well, obviously being background in journalism and, creating content hubs, there's a lot more to it than that. So tell us a little bit about your model, because you mentioned that you've got the content, and then you've got affiliate way of doing business, where people can, an affiliate model, just for those who don't know, is where you provide a special link and you click, the customer clicks, they buy directly from the retailer, but you as the affiliate, get a commission off that sale. So tell us a little bit about that model, why you chose that model as well, as opposed to, say, drop shipping or even, like stocking goods. So tell us a little bit about that.
Okay. Look, first, I think the general consensus is that it can be challenging to make money off a content hub.
Yes.
That's the general, and I think a lot of that comes back to the internet as a platform, or as, a media source. There's an expectation that, the content should be provided for free. And that's really tricky because it actually isn't free to produce. So
very good point. I hope, can we just pause there? I just want everyone who's listening to actually take note of what Melissa has said. Yes, there's an expectation of content to be free, but it is not free to produce. Thank you. I love that. It's a really good little soundbite. Okay, carry on.
So for us, it was, when we were looking at the modelling. So as I talked about when I spoke about the why, the original thought was, we'll do a shop. That's what we'll do. There's not that many around. At that time, there wasn't. Let's do a retail shop. And when we spent a lot of time, I was working with Lainey actually at this stage, who I'd run a previous campaign with called Meat Free Week. And I've run an I really feel like I'm showing my age, but anyway, I run an online retail business with my ex-husband, which I'm still involved with. So it's a good little business, and that runs a full service warehouse. So I had experience in that. We have a really good friend who owns an Australian retail marketplace called Hard to Find, and we used to work with her in publishing as well.
Yeah, I've heard of that.
Yeah, great business, and we're all very close to Eri, and so we had a lot of, I suppose, mentors and access to information where we could really drill down into the different models. And I think, running, it's just that thing where I think it can be really easy to, again, it's a bit like the content, but with retail, you can go, but you get your margins are so much greater when you run your warehouse, but you've got to factor in the picking, the packing, the materials to do that, your dispatch setups. in terms of running a marketplace, and we did look at that quite seriously. So the marketplace is really where you're bringing everything together onto a central location online, but you're drop shipping, which means you're not actually handling the physical dispatch of the merchandise. Yeah. But because you're the marketplace, you are responsible for the entire customer journey. So the customer is housed within your site. So look, your margins there are better, than if you're doing an affiliate program. But, with I suppose with a bit of Eri's help and just really looking at it, we came to see that there was another option available to us, which was the affiliate model. And although the margins aren't quite as big, when you factor in, when you factor in that you're not needing to, have customer service, like actually have staff who are managing the customer service, who are doing the transactions, tracking all the orders, it does become. And it became an easy decision for us. It was like, wow, we can actually curate. We can choose a handful of people that we really want to work with. And we've got some fantastic brands. I mean, the shop is still a bit of a work in progress, I should say, to be honest. But, we've partnered with people like The Iconic, Guinness, Angela Roy. The Iconic has brands like Sans Beast, Matt and Nat. We've also have an affiliate partnership with Flora and Fauna, the Australian brand, the V-Spot, which is another fantastic vegan retail brand. So from that point of view, I suppose we were able to partner with brands we wanted, individually negotiate, what commission structure. So I suppose the big challenge we have there is, if we're putting forward content on the Content Hub, so we do these things called fashion collections. So a recent one was 9 vegan backpacks that you've got to get your hands on this winter. But we will only work with the brands we like. So I think that's always that challenge, really, from a business point of view. It's like, okay, we need to have editorial integrity, because if we're solving problems and we're recommending brands, we need to make sure they are really brands that they are brands that we love, and that we would recommend even if we weren't going to make a small commission on them. So we do have a disclosure. Sorry, that's my dog. I shouldn't say. You might want to stop, Katrina. Sorry.
Oh, no, that's all right. I have dogs and cats come on the podcast. What's his or her name?
Her name's Ruby, and she's
Ruby.
Really old.
Oh, we'll just say hello to her. Hello, Ruby. Hello, sweetheart. Don't worry. If you've probably heard, I always say hello to the dog or cat. Often
it makes me feel, I feel so unprofessional.
Oh, not at all. Like, it's lovely. I quite like it. I've had a kitten meowing, and then when we actually said her name and acknowledged her, she was quiet for the rest of it. The only exception, I had Susie Welsh was on, who's wonderful. She's got 2 amazing, I think they're Great Pyrenees, and they kind of wouldn't, even though I did acknowledge them, they didn't be quiet, so they kind of had to go out the room. But generally speaking, they're all fine. I've
been known to have meetings that I'm not exaggerating with, like my chickens, like one where they were chicks, like sitting on my screen. Just anyway.
I love that. No, that's fantastic. No, look, I love that. Thank you for explaining that, because I think that's helpful for people to know that there are these different models, because I know a lot of people are getting into like this online marketplace and, the whole drop shipping, and it's interesting that the margins are better there. But like you say, you've got to factor that in with the whole customer support, because they're kind of the customer service experience is still going through your website. So at the end of the day, you're kind of relying on, other companies. If they mess up, it's you that's going to, get the blame, kind of, or be perceived to be messing up. So, so the affiliate model is an interesting one. And like you say,
and there's a huge, sorry to cut you off. I was just going to say, there's a huge, shop style, which is obviously not vegan, but people will sometimes say, oh, but if your customers go, you're not capturing them. And it's like, well, they're not coming to us necessarily because to shop necessarily, but they can shop if they're there. Hopefully they're coming to us because they've seen one of our articles, whether it's on, the best vegan trainers, the best vegan backpacks, knitwear that's cruelty-free. So they're coming to us for content. So that's really when we say the model's built around content. So shop style is a full affiliate model, hugely successful, and they also have a very strong content component. It's a different model to us, but the retail side is a very good example of how, as a retailer, it can actually work.
Absolutely, no, for sure. That's really helpful. No, and it's good. And like you say, you can negotiate different commission rates with different retailers. And I love what you said about the editorial integrity, which I'm big on as well. Like I'll only take on, like, for example, working with someone on PR consulting or done for you PR, and only if I would be happy to champion that brand anyway. It's got to kind of fit with that integrity. It's not just, oh yeah, well, you're giving us money, therefore we'll promote you. So
exactly.
So it's good that you're finding that balance. Interesting enough, so just out of curiosity, because I know while we're on the subject of kind of revenue raising with content hubs, now a lot of the content hubs are introducing advertising models as well. I'm curious as to, do you think that's something you might plan to do down the track, or are you sticking with solely with the affiliate model at the moment?
Look, I think we will. It's funny you should say that, because we are looking at it, and it's just such a tricky thing, isn't it? Because the options, obviously there's Google AdSense. There was another one I just saw recently. It's tricky when you can't always control. I mean, I know you can block certain ads. It's just down to whether then that changes the user experience. So I think ultimately we always come back to, I think one of the other things we're looking at is sponsored content, because we can have a greater control over that, going back to this editorial integrity again. We have been approached and we haven't gone down that path yet, but I think that is something that we might look at. And I don't have a clear answer other than to say that we are discussing it. And I think it's always about weighing up, it concerns me that, the revenue generation might be quite low in terms of what you're having to give up from a user experience on the site. It's about weighing up whether, okay, but I certainly wouldn't rule it out.
Got it. So in terms of with the content, so who creates that? Because I know I had Jodie from Live Kindly on the show recently, and I know in the beginning, for about the first year or 18 months, she got people like creating content for free to kind of create this community. And then as soon as, she had some revenue coming in, she started paying her writers and her content creators, which was great and ethical. So I'm curious, are you taking a similar role to who creates your content at the moment, and how often? And if you have external contributors, how does that work in terms of you paying them, and if so, how does that keep your business sustainable, particularly at an early point as a startup?
So it's a bit of all of that. The original model was actually to have, I don't know if you're familiar with Mind Body Green, but so that was a bit of the modelling for the Content Hub, actually. So we would have this huge array of voices from the vegan space, probably not dissimilar to what Jodie was doing. The problem with that, and actually when we did launch, we approached from our publishing days, and we had access to people from Meat Free Week, so we were able to gather quite a lot of diverse content. And I suppose the trouble with that is that it can start to sound off-brand, I suppose, if you're trying to, have a sort of a certain brand voice. You can get these other voices in that, which in itself can be great. So what we have found, we always had a budget in for contributing writers, because, as I said earlier, it's not free. So that was always built. It was built into the budget right from the get-go.
Oh, nice. That's good to know.
Yeah. So, and we'd worked with a beauty writer, Shona Walker, on Meat Free Week, and some other again, back to publishing. So she's very experienced in the beauty space. Sarah, who we work with, is also Sunday Life editor. So I suppose we're connected in that sense. And then we were able to reach out through people we knew more into the vegan space. I've also done some writing, it's probably then very heavily subbed. Sally's got a really good background in fashion. We've got a couple of young writers. So we have been lucky. I wouldn't say it's an internship as such, but Zoe works at an ethical fashion store. She's got a degree in fashion design. She's been doing some of our collections. So I suppose from that point of view, we've got a combination of people that are working for very little and they're doing it for the experience. Yeah. We've then got some more experienced writers who are being paid, and they're probably doing us a little bit of a mates rate deal because we're mates.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's kind of a bit of an all. And look, we would love to increase our publishing frequency. I mean, we publish a minimum of 3 to 4 times a week. Where we can, we'd love to be doing that daily. And the other thing we've had is, so Sal, I mentioned earlier, had reached out to Jodie, and we're able to take their content and share it. So there's also this other, I suppose, cross-pollination of content.
Yeah. So like do you mean like a straight republish and then say first?
Yeah, straight republish. And got it. Yeah.
Yeah.
And there's a few people that we do that with. And we've also had people that have approached us. So we've got it on our site that if you'd like to write for us, please do. And I hope no one that's applied to us is listening to this, because some of it is just, it's not, it's just, and so many people, I think they're just on a obviously they're doing the whole SEO thing and looking for backlinks. So
I get those. Yeah, I know what you mean.
Like,
they drive me mad. Yeah.
It's like we're called the vegan company. Our audience is, we're talking to vegans or people that want to be vegan.
Yes.
So, what I'm just trying to understand. We've got now a nice little reply back, and it's not to be awful, but it's fun. Again, that thing when we started, I used to labour over these sort of responses and not wanting to offend people. And now it's like, just cut and paste. Here's our response.
Absolutely. Yeah. In case people are listening, it's like, there's people that kind of go, I would love to write a guest post for your site. And some of them even go to the trouble to say, here are a couple of ideas, but they're like so generic and it's so obvious that I'm just one of probably 100 or more sites that they're, and they don't even mention, and yes, I'm a vegan. And also I've noticed, well, they don't even put their contact details. They just put their name. There's no phone number, there's no web, it's so true. I know, it's so frustrating, to be perfectly honest. I haven't even necessarily got a cut and paste. Often with those I just delete them, as a lot of media does. Working in media and editorial, I'm sure I know you said you worked in the account side, but I'm sure your editorial colleagues would just go, you haven't got time to just reply to those, just delete. So if you're listening absolutely. And you want to pitch to Melissa, make sure that you you've got lots of tips on my website on Vegan Business Media on how to approach the media in a way that will maximise your chances of actually getting published. So great. Well, thank you for sharing that. That's interesting. Now, you touched a little bit on funding, but how's the business been funded to date?
So we'd we put money in and then set a budget. And then obviously have our incomings, and it's probably like all businesses, and you would know this as well. You start out, and what you think you're going to be generating is quite often not what you're generating. But in saying that, I wouldn't say it's better than expected, but having run businesses before and knowing that everything takes twice as long, we're getting there. Like it's, I suppose there's that constant. One of the things in terms of a challenge is, we regularly look at the budget, and it's just sort of like, where are we spending? How can we be spending better? We have regular whips with our SEO guy. So one of the things that has been working well for us is using a content retargeting program, and where we take our content, the ones that are, solution focused with affiliate links, and then, placing them, in front of our target audience and driving them back to the site. So, things like that. We can see we're seeing really strong growth of that particular activity or tactic. Does that answer the question?
Is that like where people go to a website and then your ad appears on them?
So it's not an ad. What it is it's down the bottom. It will say, so you'll read an article and then you'll see down the bottom it will say, you might also like, or
yes, one of those. Yeah.
So then
okay.
Yeah. And it's working. It definitely, without a doubt, from a traffic driver point of view, I would definitely say there's a correlation between what we're seeing in terms of, because we haven't really put a lot of money behind social. Like, our social numbers are quite small, and it is something we're now looking at, because I suppose we needed to look at how we would be generating revenue. So it was like, okay, I know people do use social from that point of view, but I think for us, social's been more about letting it grow organically. And we have started putting some money into Facebook, and we are starting to see growth. And then as the sort of the discussion that we always have is our audience even on Facebook?
With what you just touched on with content retargeting, is that also, are you talking about native advertising as well, as it sometimes can also be known as, like from our partners? Unless the terms change, maybe the terms change, because it sounds like
it probably is. We call it our digital guy Dan calls it content. He calls it, there's Outbrain, and I think there's
that's the one, Taboola or something. Yeah, I know what you mean. I think it used to be called out native advertising. They must have changed it to give it more of a
maybe it still is called that, but that's how he refers to it.
Okay, that's interesting. You've had success with that. What kind of sites? You don't need to necessarily name names, but what kind of sites are you putting your?
I knew you'd ask. I don't know.
I
do know. That's not true, actually. Do you know what I do know? But I'd have to go and look. We get, obviously, when we do our whips with him, so we have quite a detailed report, and we can log into the dashboard. This all sounds really technical, and I'm actually not that technical. But you log into the dashboard, and then actually by article, you can see how each is performing, and it does say the ones. I'm happy to come back. I'm happy to even send you something.
Yeah. I'm just curious, like whether it's fashion websites, mainstream media, or whether it's more independent type sites that you're going on. Yeah, I was just kind of curious because that's an interesting.
Look, from what I'm going to make this up, but I'm just going to trust that my instinct is right because I looked at the report just the other day. Pretty mainstream and pretty targeted. That's what I would say. So, and interestingly, I think the next conversation we'll be having is really looking at, okay, well, what's working and what's not working. And there's some things that have really surprised us. Because they're not necessarily. So one of the things that we've found really resonates is like good news stories, which don't actually help us. Interestingly, I mean, they help us in terms of, but people love it. It's really interesting. Like, so things like, when Schnitz did the vegan menu, when Grill did that meat-free Monday recently.
Yeah.
So they're kind of non-vegan, big places. So when those... So we sort of mix it up with some of the what I call pain point editorial, where we're solving problems, and that they tend to have affiliate links to their collections, the fashion collections or beauty collections. And then we also will put in some of the, they're just the good news stories, and they do really well. It's interesting.
Right. When you say do the good news stories, you mean on your website or in the content retargeting?
No. So he's also done. He has placed some of them. It's only because it came up the other day, and one of the most popular was actually that grilled one. That's why I'm seeing it I'm sort of in my head. I'm picturing it, and it was at the top of the report, and it had or on the dashboard. Wow. So it had just done. So I think it's for us as well. Like, so the combination is obviously to get people onto our
your
website,
where they can see what else you do. Yeah, exactly.
Absolutely.
No, that makes a lot of sense. Thank you for sharing that. That's really interesting. So in terms of your demographic, what's your predominant demographic in terms of location? I know we've discussed you're now focusing on Australia. If you've got those, because I know your site's been going since about, I think, 2017 officially. So in terms of what's your kind of breakdown in terms of location, age, gender? Who's your main market?
Okay, so with the website, it actually didn't launch. We spent quite a lot of time working on the model, and then also going back to that content thing, gathering. It took so long to pull all the content together so that when the hub launched, there was a really deep body of information within the hub.
Okay.
But in terms of the audience, and look, this is one of those things that we actually got right, and we did spend quite a bit of time looking at it. And again, going back to the work we did on Meat Free Week, we could see that there was a lot of young women, university-age women, who are really passionate about what was happening in this space. We also know from the fashion magazines that, younger women have that sort of disposable income to spend. So we put a target audience of, it was really millennial women back then, but I'd say now it's really stretched as they're getting older to Gen Z. But women 18 to 35 who would identify as vegan or who are vegan curious. So, and that's, I can't actually attest for they're vegan, but in terms of straight demographics, that 18 to 35 is pretty much what we're hitting, women, which is great. That would be about 60 to 70% of our audience. So that bit's tick.
Got it.
And in terms of Australia is definitely the biggest part of our audience. But interestingly, since we've been doing this content retargeting, we are, and look, this is an interesting thing because it's like, we don't necessarily want this to be happening, but we are seeing some growth in the audience from the US and the UK.
Right. Cool. Are there anything similar in the US and the UK to what you're doing that you know off the top of your head? I know there used to be Ecorazzi, but when that got bought out, it completely changed and just became very full on animal rights. But is there anything similar?
Look, yes and no. I mean, I think there's obviously content or websites, content hubs that are doing lots of, great news pieces, and obviously plant-based news and Live Kindly, but we've got that much stronger fashion beauty focus.
That's what I meant, in fashion.
Yes, no. I think for us there really is an opportunity to carve out something here and own this. And even we've always said that we don't want to be campaigny, but even looking at like the use of leather in the fashion industry, and I'm quite passionate about this. I mean, interestingly, we had a conversation about fur, and I think it was either Sal or Shona said, we can't do fur again. And it's like, well, we can actually, because although even though the fashion houses are, all sort of coming out and announcing they're not using fur, as an industry, this is a great report from ActAsia, and as an industry, it's actually growing. So it's like, okay, we're not done with this conversation. we're going to talk about it some more.
Right.
So I think the challenge editorially is how do we make some of this information that's not always great or interesting reading, how do we make people care about it? So
yeah, for sure. I know. I thought there's something just recently come out about the cashmere. I think it is.
Yes,
Peter did a thing, and it was just horrific. And I think
horrific.
That's why I think it's so important to do what you're doing, because I say there is a big focus on food, and I think fashion is an area where we really kind of need this information so that people go, oh, that gorgeous soft, thing that material you're touching, actually came from, screaming, terrified animals in agony. And it's important, I guess, to get that out there, but to also offer an alternative and to say, here's an amazing, stylish alternative, rather than
exactly
you've got to wear a straw sack, or do you know what I mean? Like, really boring.
No, look, and there is some really exciting things happening. I mean, one of the things we're looking at doing is we've just put a pitch into Virgin Australia Melbourne Fashion Festival, and would love to be involved with them next year in hosting like a vegan collection and sponsoring some young designers working with new materials.
That would
again
be
just a change. Amazing, I know,
because they're doing that in LA. I think there was a vegan fashion week or
Absolutely.
something in LA, and it's starting to happen in the US. I think that would be great. I'd love to see something like that in Australia. And my friend Justin runs Vegan Style. He's been on the show and everything in Melbourne. He does the shoes, and I know he often lends, like shoes rather for fashion shows.
We'll definitely be
interested in that. Yeah, because he does really nice brand, like really kind of, not just your sensible lesbian shoe, not lesbian shoes, like that vegan shoe. I had a double whammy there of like the sensible Martins that I used to wear when I was, it was at the late 1980s, and I'd go to like consciousness raising women's workshops, and I had these really sensible, like they weren't vegan unfortunately at the time, like Doc Martin type boots, but I also had my screaming red lipstick and long hair and a t-shirt saying sisters are doing it for themselves, and I was told that wasn't good enough. My lipstick and long hair was not good enough. I said, but I've got sensible shoes, so that's where that came out. But anyway, but he does really like stylish fashion. I think that's important, because there is this myth that vegan fashion is boring, is or cheap, cheaply made, poor quality. And
totally.
I think it's really important. I know people I've interviewed. I love the lovely Sue Gant from Gunness, who's in my book and who's been on the show, Angela, all of those that are doing these wonderful products that are beautiful and great quality.
Like even Melbourne, like Sans Beast, like with what Catherine's doing, and just it's such her stuff is so gorgeous, and it's Australian, and she's got that strong background. It is a really exciting space, and I think that it's like I said, like that's for us. It was all like, well, where is the easy to find? To your point, there is that sort of that perception that it's daggy and dated. We just actually ran an editorial piece that Sarah did on fashion mythbusters, exactly addressing those things as a piece of editorial, that it's not stylish, that it's not good for the environment, or it's not, so just sort of breaking down some of those. And as a brand, it's funny because when our brief to our designer, who we've worked with on a couple of different things before, and again, X magazines, it was basically, okay, we don't want to see any green, we don't want to see an apple, we don't want to see any fruit, we don't want to see any animals. Like, we want it to be unexpected. We want people to almost be challenged. We've got a really strong logo. It's sort of the way, the brand ID is something that I think we're all really proud of, because it's not what you'd expect from a vegan brand.
Nice. It's too easy to default to the fruit and the green and everything, isn't it?
And it's beautiful, and there's a place for that. It's so beautiful. And it's just like, for us, it was like, no, we just want to be, we don't want that. We actually want to challenge, so that, and almost so that there's that, I mean, I know there's been that research, which I know you've spoken about as well, about, the word vegan can be a negative, and do you use it or do you not use it?
Yeah.
And we deliberately chose to use the word vegan because it was, and then have this sort of juxtapozition with what the brand looked like. So that it was,
demystifying the word and everything.
Absolutely.
Yeah. I love that.
And actually owning it, and sort of shaking some of the shame off it, because I think there can, I mean, I remember when we started Meat Free Week, we met with this fantastic chef and she was really supportive, and she was like, oh, I'm really glad you're not using the word vegan. Whatever you do, just don't use the word vegan. And
oh my gosh.
things have changed. I mean, that was like, that was sort of 6 years ago, but things have changed. But it was like, oh, note to self, don't say the word vegan.
That's cool. Now, I wanted to ask you, just touch on one question I wanted to ask you that popped into my mind. Why did you choose to go with like an online model versus, say, like digital magazines you can get, which are basically, you lay them out like a print mag, but they're fully digital. So, and then people can click on issue or something and you can physically turn the page. Why did you choose to go like with online versus a digital mag versus even print?
Look, okay, so we've all come from a print background, and so although we weren't on editorial, we were on the advertising and strategy side. So very involved with editorial, worked really closely with them. So from it, and you're obviously involved with pagination. It's not that it's a dying medium, but I think there'll be a resurgence actually in print media, but it will be for really, high-end niche titles is where it'll go. And it just wasn't, maybe because we'd all done it for so long, it didn't feel right. Sal's sort of operated since in the digital marketing space. Lainey and I had run the campaign with Meat Free Week, which was really all online. The business that I'm still involved with, with my ex-husband, is an online business. So I think for me, that's sort of where it's at. I personally don't like those digital magazines. I find them frustrating to read. I think if you're going to read a magazine, a print version, at least it's sort of a luxury experience. You can sit down with a cup of tea and, again, I'm probably showing my
No, I get it.
but there's going back to that modelling, Mind Body Green is just it's a site that I really loved. Goop was another one that we all quite liked. I know that brings up, that's Gwyneth Paltrow's one. Like, people go, oh, Goop, it's terrible. But I just think that I like the idea. We all liked the idea of being able to go to a site, something that was easy to navigate, and if I wanted to find a bit of information here or a bit of information there, I could. So again, going back to this, why are we doing this? We're trying to make it easier for people for people like us, but just younger, to transition if they were, a lot of people say they're vegan, but they're actually really a plant-based eater. Do you know what I mean?
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, so it was a bit like, how do we make it easy? And so I think it has to be visual, it's got to be easy. And because we were running with the affiliate model, that just made sense because you embed the links into whether it's the editorial copy or then obviously with the shop. So, from a modelling point of view, that also, the model also drove some of that decision.
Yeah, got it. No, I understand. I mean, I get that with the whole digital mag thing, because you have to, I find I don't really want to read something sitting upright on my computer. And even if I look at it on my iPad, I've got to keep zooming in and zooming out. And it's, whereas, you just plop an article in front of me, it's much easier to read. So I get that. But I was just curious, having, your experience with publishing, why you chose that model. So thank you. That's brilliant. You shared some really great stuff. So just to wrap up then, tell us a bit about, so what's the long-term vision, I guess, for yourself and the brand?
Yeah, well, look, I suppose now what we're seeing with the revenue that's been generated, it's promising, definitely. Like that's the good news. And so I suppose we're going, okay, well, this probably requires, it's like, so if we were to do, I'm not going to say if, I'm going to say when we...
Nice. Nice reframe. I like that.
No, absolutely. We will make it happen one way or another. So, but, doing this sort of vegan fashion show, that will require funding. So, which the model itself at the moment can, we can cover sort of things like writers, and we can reinvest back into digital marketing. So that's all fine. But then when we want to start doing bigger, more ambitious projects, then I suppose that's where we're at now, going, okay, well, if we're to take it to the next level, that's really about funding. And that's really about, how do we take this business to the next level? So it really is to be I suppose, we used to say global, now let's just say Australian or, Southern Hemisphere, but like a go-to destination for all things vegan, fashion, beauty, and feel good news.
Wonderful. I love it. Fantastic. It's been really great speaking with you, Melissa. I think we've dug into some really interesting aspects, and you've been very generous in sharing your expertise and just your business journey. So I really appreciate it. Thank you so much for being on the show today.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I really appreciate it. And the one thing I'd say is just if you're, if people are starting out, don't be afraid to back yourself, like do your homework and I think really you've got to have grit. If you go, you'd know this, Katrina, talking to people, you've just got to have grit because you're going to hit some tough times. And I think it's all about the planning and really focusing on, your why. Why do I do this? Because in those tough times, your why is going to be the thing that actually keeps you moving forward.
Absolutely. Thanks again, Melissa.
Thank you.
So that was Melissa Hobbs from The Vegan Company. You can find out more at thevegancompany.love. And that link is on the show notes page at veganbusinessmedia.com/podcasts and going to episode 121. Now for some vegan business news highlights. Applications are open for the 3rd annual Pitch and Plant, the plant-based business investment pitching competition created by UK-based media and events startup Vevolution in 2017. In a new development for 2019, Vevolution has announced that it will make investments directly into startups. Damien Clarkson, who was on this podcast recently in episode 117 with co-founder Judy Nadal, said Vevolution is looking for businesses that can have great social impact. We want to support businesses which transform the way we eat and how we treat the planet, Damien said. We're open to applications from plant-based meat and dairy businesses and other areas including health, tech, beauty, media and businesses with circular economic principles. This year, the Pitch and Plant judging panel will include Damien and Judy and several other high-profile entrepreneurs, including Veganuary chairman Matthew Glover. Applications close at midnight on the 18th of June, UK time. You can apply at vevolution.co/pitch-plant-2019, and that link is on the show notes page for this episode. The alternative protein market could be worth $140 billion in the next decade, according to analysts at Barclays, reports CNBC. The analyst said that while lab-based meat is still likely several years away from hitting supermarket shelves, plant-based protein continues to gain ground compared with animal-based proteins, and the financial services company expects this trend to continue for the foreseeable future. They even concluded that there is a bigger market opportunity for plant-based and maybe even lab-based protein than perhaps was argued for electric vehicles 10 years ago. Now, while this is still just a fraction of the meat industries, which are worth trillions of dollars, it's still heartening to see this growth. So that's it for this episode of Vegan Business Talk. Thank you so much for tuning in. If you enjoyed the show, I'd really appreciate it if you gave it a review and rating on iTunes or any other platform you're listening on. Finally, I encourage you to head over to veganbusinessmedia.com, where you can find more free resources as well as details of how we can work together to help you grow your vegan business. I'm Katrina Fox, author of Vegan Ventures, Start and Grow an Ethical Business. And I look forward to catching up with you in the next episode of Vegan Business Talk. Bye for now.